Hi everyone, I am Surabhi and I run Luchi and Mutton's dog behavior and nutrition. I'm based out of Gurgaon in India and I offer private nutrition and behavior consultations for pet parents and dog caregivers. I work with a holistic approach using science and empathy as key pillars in supporting our dogs. Welcome to another episode of this podcast. If you are new to fresh feeding for your dogs or are thinking of ways to make fresh food exciting for them, then this episode is for you. As always, please share what stood out for you in the episode. You can connect with me via email or social media channels like Instagram or Facebook, details of which are in the episode description below. So, where do we start from? Maybe the beginning? Our dogs have interestingly actually always eaten fresh food. When we look at the evolution of dogs across the world, we find evidence of them eating human scraps of food, fresh food that was local and seasonal to the regions that they belonged to. The diets also had evidence of fecal matter from other animals, and they didn't really have a homogeneous diet. Canine diets were made of food that were dependent on availability and accessibility, and of course, humans played an indispensable part of this. This concept of packaged dog food really came in around the 19th century when an individual called James Pratt saw a bunch of dogs eating leftover biscuits and gravy and vegetables in England and decided to formulate commercially prepared dog food that could then be made available for all dogs. Up until then, though, there wasn't really this concept of dog food and human food. It was just food. And that's what I really love about feeding fresh. We go back to this idea of our dogs just eating food, and that too food that can make them dance and smile and possibly even sing. I find that, we really are at a great time in dog nutrition because we can balance the wisdom of old times with new modern day knowledge and feed our dogs a diet that is safe and healthy for them today. We can use this newfound knowledge to improve our choices for our dogs, but also create space to enjoy and share food with them because food really can be a love language. And so, my approach to dog nutrition is not just a scientific one, but is also a relational one. It has a little bit of the heart and the soul because food really does have the ability to bring people and animals together in lovely, meaningful ways. And as dog guardians and caregivers, I think it's important to be mindful of that. I also feel it's a good time to call out that I am not going to be sharing diet recommendations in this episode. For that, you can reach out for a one on one nutrition consultation and get personalized support. So, when feeding fresh, it's helpful to remember a couple of different things. You've got to feed your dog a diet that is rich in nutrition profiles, has wholesome foods, and has incredible variety. Wholesome foods that are not processed, that are essentially available in their natural form, foods that are rich in nutritional values and variety really to offer a range of nutritional benefits to your dogs because every food has a different nutrient profile. I know a big argument around variety has also been in the fact that dogs have an affinity for novel foods, but I have found that that may not always be true. I've consulted for dogs who are very, very specific about what they like or don't like and can take a really long time to try something new. And that's totally okay. I like to think of neophilia as a personality trait where you can have individual dogs on a spectrum, really. My argument, however, for variety is slightly different. And again, this has evolved as I, continue to learn from my dogs and the dogs that I consult for and with. I find that when we offer variety and choices to our dogs, we are actually enabling them to act on their own biofeedback. They get to decide what to eat based on what their bodies need. And when we offer that variety to them, they get to choose the best way to feed their bodies, minds, and souls. I find this to be especially true for dogs who are actually recovering from sickness. When I'm asked what to feed a dog who's recovering from sickness or has been unwell for a really long time, has lost their appetite, my honest answer is feed the dog whatever they want to eat. of course, keeping safety in mind, because ultimately they know best. Offer choices every day and see what your dog picks. Dogs do have the ability to self select plants and herbs and more. I mean, there's an entire branch on canine zoo pharmacognosy for this. And the diets we create for our dogs need to have more room for this self selection. This is true for human beings as well. I mean, you cannot standardize this and or get dogmatic about it because every dog is different and what they need, especially as they recover and heal, looks different. For example, I think of times that I catch a cold and my go-to healing food really is a bowl of warm chicken soup and a plate of extremely spicy chili chicken. For someone else, it could look very, very different. But imagine being told to ignore what you want to eat or what your body is needing in that moment and being forced to eat something different. Not only is it an unpleasant experience, but perhaps it can actually also slow down and interfere with the recovery or healing process. Clients I work with find this conversation on choices slightly overwhelming, and understandably so. The questions I usually get are: does this mean I have to feed something new every day? How do I plan for this? How do I manage budgets for this? And I get it. We want to keep mealtime simple and hassle free without too many complications. But the truth is, you can have both. You can keep mealtime simple, but also see them as an opportunity to learn more about your dog. And so, some ways that I like to introduce variety, which by the way have also worked for my clients, are: number one, not mixing everything in the bowl together, but making sure that the components of the diet can be told apart. So, what this does is it allows me to choose, well, not me, it allows me to see what my dogs are choosing first, what they're not eating too much of, what they are not enjoying, or what they are enjoying too much of. And what happens is that when everything is mixed and mashed together, it's very hard to notice some of these really subtle differences. So for example, I've always noticed that when I put a bowl of food down for Luchi, and if it's really soupy, then she's likely to sort of drink the water first before she gets to the meals of it. Or even something as simple as, I remember in the early days when I used to also sort of feed them raw. um, they would pick out the more digestible bones first, chomp on them, chew on them, and then come back to the main bowl. Or for example, I mean, I see this so much with Luchi, which is why I feel like she's my sole dog when it comes to food. If I ever were to throw peas into her food, oh man, she would just like, she'd find ways to put her tongue into the bowl and just avoid all the peas. So usually if I've added peas to the food, her bowl is clean except for like a bunch of peas that are right there. So those are some of the differences in behaviors you start noticing when you don't mix everything together and mash everything together. The second thing that you can try is introducing a new food item once or twice a week based on what's easy for you. So, this could be a new meaty bone, it could be a new vegetable, it could be a new offal or organ meat, it could be a new fat. I like to do this outside of the meals first, like almost like a tasting sampler, and then add more or less of it based on my dog's responses. So that always really helps, especially like with vegetables, because Luchi can be really picky about them. I guess selective about them. And so I like to sort of try and see which one she's going to have in a little bit of like boiled form. Or and so it's really interesting because actually as I'm talking about it, this is coming to me. I remember once you know I offered her a boiled broccoli to see if that was something that she would take, and she absolutely refused it. She looked at me with disgust, she spat it out. And then I happened to sort of, we were having a barbecue at home, and I said, okay, I'm going to, put together some treats for the dogs. And I happened to sort of marinate the vegetables in some spices and some yogurt, and then I sort of just tossed them um, in a tandoor like situation. And so it was really nicely well, grilled and a little bit charred, and it had a very nice smoky flavor. And just on a whim, I said, okay, let me see if Luchi takes to this kind of broccoli. And man, oh man, she just like gobbled it up, right? Um, and it was so interesting for me to see that and notice that difference. And I guess that makes sense because I could relate to that because I am like that myself with very specific vegetables, I suppose. Um, I have a thing about mushrooms. I can't eat mushrooms if they're given to me like in a very chunky, wholesome form. They need to be diced up really fine, or they need to be cut really thin, or they need to be, sort of ground up in a paste for me to consume them. Uh, and so I guess, just like human beings and their specifications and their quote unquote hang ups. Our dogs have them too, and I feel like that's absolutely fine. And so that brings me to my third point, which is, just really sort of changing up the way that you are actually offering the food. So, switching between raw and home cooked, including, some dehydrated foods occasionally, that adds a nice crunch and texture to the diet. Like I said, trying different preparations of vegetables, trying different preparations of meats, basically just really changing things up and seeing how your dogs respond to it and what they really enjoy and what they don't prefer so much. Um, and of course, the fourth and the most important thing is just making notes on all of these things. And I think really using this as a way to learn more about your dogs and getting to know them just so much better. There's something really intimate, right, about making these kind of observations. Uh, I also think that there's a sense of attunement that builds, I suppose, when we spend time like this, right? Where it's not really our agenda and it's not about what we want to get our dogs to do, but it is really just about what do we want to learn from them today. And I think there's something really special and intimate about that. And I do think food is a very intimate way of knowing someone and showing care and love. I happened to chat with Andrew Hale from Dog Centered Care, um, about this in so much depth, and it was such a lovely conversation. You're likely to find that up on his Facebook page, and YouTube page, in fact. But yeah, and we spoke so much about just food and love and heart and soul and dogs. So that's definitely a talk you should tune into. In fact, I'll put the link in the episode description as well. But yeah, I think that if someone remembers my preferences with food and demonstrates that, I actually feel really loved and cared for. Feels very special, and I'd like my dogs and actually all dogs that I am in service of to experience that. I think to feel understood, to be cared for, and to be seen for who they are and what matters to them and doesn't matter. Um, like I said, this is also such a great way to offer choices to our dogs. And I think this is also a slightly, bigger conversation, this conversation on choices. Sharing space with us for our dogs pretty much means that we make every decision for them, right? From where to sleep, what to sleep on, when to eat, where to eat, what to eat, when to pee, where to walk, how much to walk. I mean, the list is endless and can be quite frustrating and stressful. Um, to live this life with very little to no agency and choice. And so, by offering these choices and even starting with food as an opportunity to do that, we can really help empty the dog's cup, as we like to say at Barks. Essentially, it's one of the many things that we can do towards helping our dogs just feel calmer and more emotionally regulated. Just offering choices and letting them make decisions within those choices. Um, And so I think that also addresses a little bit of the safety piece, right? Because we're not asking our dogs to choose between something toxic and non toxic. We're saying we're going to offer you two non toxic options and choose from there, right? And so it can be as much of that kind of a framework, but the idea is, can we at least consider giving them those choices? I think when I talk about diet in general, I'm also quite often asked about supplements and the role of supplementation in the food. And I usually keep that out of these conversations on overall fresh feeding because, again, I personally don't believe in feeding dogs a long list of supplements at all. Um, I believe in balancing that by feeding what's absolutely necessary. So it's actually supplementing the diet because of either existing deficiencies that are a result of credible blood work or are natural and a replacement for synthetic supplements that have already been agreed with and aligned on by a vet, right? And so again, the goal with supplementation is really for it to be effective and specific, and also for most part temporary, right? And the goal necessarily isn't to include anything and everything. And so even with supplementation, unless they are needed for specific health conditions and are mandatory, we should give our dogs the choice to self-select supplements that their bodies need. So if you want to try the next big superfood, offer it in small quantities to your dogs outside of their main meals, and don't be disheartened if your dog rejects it. They are simply listening to what their bodies need, and that specific superfood or the form in which you are offering that superfood might just not be. Um, all right, that's really it for today. Do let me know what resonated with you in the episode today. I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like for me to talk about something specific, drop me a line and I will try and pick that as a topic for an upcoming podcast episode. Do look out for the new one next week. Till then, love to your dogs from Luchi, Mutton, and me.